Good morning, everyone, from a snowy and chilly Metro Detroit area. My name is Saeed Khan, and it's my pleasure to host this week's The Week That Was. You will probably notice that we have a kind of truncated group with us today. We actually sent them out to do the snow plowing. No, actually, that's not true. We are without our maestro, Alan Lengel, who decided to leave us for warmer climes, but well-deserved, and we hope you're enjoying it out there, Alan, in case you are listening. But we do have, representing Deadline Detroit today, also on the road from a classified and undisclosed location, her car, Nancy Derringer. How's it going, Ramblin' Nance?
It's going great. And, I think I finally understand why so many people do those video selfies in a car. The lighting is really very nice here. It's almost as good as a ring light. So, with the exception of the sound probably isn't the greatest, but, I'm doing my best. So
Not that you needed it, but it is quite flattering light. So
okay,
you've
good.
definitely got that. Yes.
Glad to hear it.
I think we should record this and send it to Rihanna because you too could become a Fenty ambassadrix. And we have, with his normal countenance, that's always pleasant, investigative journalist, former candidate for city council, ML Elrick.
I actually have shoveled 3 times now. And as far as lighting goes, people have told me I look better when the lights are off.
Okay. We'll take a poll. we must meet these people, not because of the fact that how they think of what you look like, but the fact that they're doing it in the dark. Yes.
Elrick, you have to get over this electoral defeat. You have so much to offer the world, and yet you're so self-deprecating, and you've been like this ever since you were unsuccessful in your bid to be a Detroit city councilman. So I'm telling you, you got a great book in you.
I was like this before, and I think
okay. Well, I didn't know you that well.
My opponent told everybody how great she was, which wasn't true, and she won. So I think I may have gone about it the wrong way.
Okay.
I think you've got at least a trilogy in you, ML. I mean, one volume just has to be on music alone. So, which, boy, I'd love to be in conversation with you on that. Okay, well, this has been a pretty busy week, notwithstanding the meteorological morass here in Detroit. Item number 1, I thought we would talk about the absence of malice. Sarah Palin was struck down twice in her defamation case against the New York Times, once by the judge and then subsequently by the jury. The judge, in a very odd ruling, said that no reasonable person could infer that the plaintiff, Palin, had proven actual malice, which of course is a requirement under the current laws of defamation, a case, ironically enough, named after the defendant, the New York Times versus Sullivan case. Nancy, where do you see this going? Do you think that she's going to take it lightly, or is it going up the food chain to SCOTUS?
I think she will appeal, but I don't know what kind of, she'll try something. She can't, her pride will not allow her to just walk away at this point. But it is a very high barrier for any public figure like Sarah Palin to climb when she's trying to allege that she's been libeled. It's very different. Anybody who works in the newspaper business can tell you we make the same mistakes that everybody else does. And what the New York Times did in this case was they made a mistake. They quickly corrected it. That's also very important. I mean, once you make a mistake, you got to fix it. But she failed to prove that they put this, they put this thing on their site because they hated her so much and they wanted to take her down a peg, which would have been the actual malice standard. So, she might go for it, but I don't know. I don't think she's got much of a leg to stand on. I wish we had one of our lawyers on the panel who could talk a little bit about this, but
apparently they're all shoveling snow right now, so we couldn't get them. But and by the way, that's I believe they're shoveling snow. I don't want to get nailed for defamation by them. But by the way, great Freudian slip calling her Sarah Palin. I don't know.
I know. I realized that. Okay. Palin. But then I didn't. Then I'd be like Trump, and I don't want to be one of those people. So,
all right. ML, what do you think about this? I mean, since New York Times versus Sullivan, we've got these two standards for public officials and for public figures. The bar is far higher. They have to prove actual, or what's sometimes called New York Times malice, which is intent, or
can't hear
even
you.
really gross negligence. Whereas for the rest of us mortal folk, it's just proving negligence. There seems to be a lot of appetite in the current Supreme Court composition to revisit New York Times versus Sullivan and perhaps lower the standard to just a single one regarding negligence. A, do you think that's wise? And B, do you think that it's going to head that way?
So I suspect that she will appeal it for a couple of reasons. One is because she's mad. And I mean that in both the American...
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing. I can't hear anybody.
But also because the way the courts are now, if she gets the Supreme Court as it's currently configured, I think there's a good chance that she's going to succeed. I think this court is set up to favor people who have a more hostile view towards the press. But the key thing, and Nancy touched on this a little bit, is if you have made a mistake involving a public figure, you're pretty much home free, because the actual malice means pretty much you have to make something up. You have to be really mean and done to destroy it. And what the New York Times did is what the law says you're supposed to do. Admit wrongdoing, admit the error as soon as possible, and then correct it. So they did both of those things. So as the law is constituted, the New York Times did what it was required to do. It's unfortunate that this sloppy editorial page editor was in such a hurry to make the point that didn't have the facts behind it. But the other issue here that's really important is that this judge may have messed this up too by announcing before the verdict came out that he was going to throw it out, because we just learned the other day that some of the jurors became aware of this through news alerts that popped up on their phones. So we may be fighting some issues that have nothing to do with the merits of the case before we get to the merits of the case. But my suspicion is Sarah Palin will appeal it. Sarah Palin will fundraise like hell for this. I'm sure she's going to try and raise money, just as Trump has been trying to raise money for his various legal things. And, if it gets to the Supreme Court, this would be a seismic change, because the rules basically are that if you're a public figure, it's tough for us to really damage your reputation, because people have already formed an opinion. Now, if somebody comes after Saeed Khan and we say something that isn't accurate, that may be the first time somebody's heard about you. They may have heard about you in a context that's very negative. So it's a really important distinction between public figures and what I would call citizens. But yeah, you think she's not going to fight it? This is the first time I've seen Sarah Palin make it headlines in a while, so of course she's going to fight.
Well, I mean, I think that brings up another really interesting question. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that somehow the other, New York Times versus Sullivan, survives a challenge to the Supreme Court. It seems as though a lot of the attention then is going to be on proving whether or not somebody's a public official. Thank you for invoking my name. But the whole idea that somebody could then go ahead and say, and I mean, this would be certainly a case that could apply to any of the three of us. Would we be a public figure such that there would have to be that higher standard to prove? I think that many who might be in the business of defaming would go ahead and claim that Khan, Elrick, and Derringer, and by the way, that is like the new Emerson, Lake, and Palmer, would go ahead and be public figures, and so they would be able to slide because they wouldn't have to prove negligence, or we wouldn't be able to prove negligence. Nancy, what do you think about that?
Well, that is probably the hair splitting. I mean, who constitutes a public figure? In our case, we voluntarily put ourselves out here. We speak, we speak as though we expect other people to listen to us. I would say that we probably are maybe on the bubble, but probably count. But Sarah Palin is so far into the public sphere. I don't think there's even I mean, she has no leg to stand on in that argument.
Yeah, I think the more interesting case will be when it's a 15-year-old TikTok social media influencer, whether he or she will be considered to be a public figure, such that the whole notion of actual malice then kicks in. Emma, what do you think about that?
Well, and I think the other thing that we have to be cognizant of is once you pass the test of whether you're a public figure, it's not just a matter of being right or wrong. It's a matter of, did you make things up, and did you make things up with a plan to harm somebody? I mean, shit happens, and the law allows for shit to happen. Making shit up to really hurt somebody, that's what her case has been fought on. But really what we saw was, I think, there were two losers in this case, Sarah Palin, who may yet win, and then the New York Times, who was the putative winner. But the veil that got pulled back and how the editorial page works, I think really fed into a narrative of the liberal media that's out to get me and fake news and all that other stuff. So it's a favorable ruling. I think a correct ruling based on the law for the media. But the case is a disaster because it just feeds into this narrative of, you guys make stuff up because you don't like people. And I think anybody who's read the New York Times editorial page doesn't need to be convinced that they don't think very highly of Sarah Palin.
Yeah, I thought that the defense of "we're just not that into you" would have been really compelling. I don't know if they really got a chance to even talk about that. Well, when it comes to public figures and when it comes to public perception, I think that perhaps there's no better example of that than the recent coverage of the Beijing Winter Olympics, and particularly the situation of Kamila Valieva, the Russian wunderkind. I know I'm borrowing from German there. I don't know what the hell the Russian word is for wunderkind, but Putinkind. But the whole idea about her being 15 years old, the first woman to land a quad jump in Olympic history, and yet news that she tested positive back in December for an enhanced, or actually a contraband drug, one that could increase stamina, but was ostensibly a heart medication. There was, of course, a suspension, a removal of the suspension, and then an adjudication of the case, which then came out in her favor. And when that happened, the International Olympic Committee and some of the anti-doping agencies were, of course, quite upset. But I don't think anyone was as upset as the NBC announcers, who it seemed truly vilified this young woman. She was well ahead in the short program, and then fell twice in the long program and ended up finishing fourth. So ultimately did not medal. NBC announcers seemed to, on the one hand, suggest that perhaps this was karma and everyone was vindicated. But yet at the same time, they went and threw shade at the Russian coach for not being more empathetic and comforting for her, really going back and forth.
That was such a joke, I have to say. I was watching this last night, and I know that Tara Lipinski and Johnny Weir stood mute during her short program a few nights ago. And that was, there were stories written about it. Oh, that was such a powerful statement that they made. And then she comes out and she's warming up and she's getting ready to start her routine. And they're saying she never should have been able to compete. This is completely wrong, blah, blah, blah. And they made they made the standard case for why she should not have been able to compete. Well, then the entire competition ends in this epic meltdown. She was skated last. She fell a few times. She did the dreaded spinning butt fall. And then she she's crying. She's weeping. She's a little girl. I mean, she's 15 years old. Whatever she doping she might have done, I feel pretty confident was not of her choice. I think she's one of these Russian athletic robots where the coach is this tyrant, and if he says swallow this, take this, drink this, you just do it. You don't talk back. And so she's weeping copiously. She's completely heartbroken. And then suddenly Tara and Johnny are like, oh, you really got to feel for her. You know, it's like, where was all this condemnation that you were doing, what, 5 minutes ago? But it was,
well, there was that claim that the medicine was actually her grandfather's. And then, of course, the memes came out about whether her grandfather was Ivan Drago. So you had that out. We have Greg Bowens, who has now joined us, journalist, civil rights activist, PR professional. Welcome, Greg.
Hey, I'm here with the mighty Elrick. Woohoo!
And you don't need to groom yourself. You look fine, and we're really anti-grooming here anyways. So we're talking about the Russian Olympics. So ML, I remember back, might have been the '84 Olympics, Mary Decker Slaney. Back then, she might have just been Mary Decker, a medium distance runner. She was the darling back then for anybody who wasn't into gymnastics, because that darling was Mary Lou Retton. And I remember she had a bit of a tussle, I think in the 800 meters, with a South African athlete, Zola Budd. They kind of tripped apart. And Marty LaQuarrie, who was not only the announcer, but apparently very good friends with Mary Decker, flailed Zola Budd. As it turned out, Zola Budd was completely absolved of any responsibility or any culpability of this. But is this just simply what we have to deal with, a kind of corporate, jingoistic American coverage? Because I watched the Olympics on CBC and said it's just gotten to be too much.
Well, so let's go back a little bit. Who's surprised that the Russian coach was unsympathetic? I mean, he's a Russian coach. I mean, and I tend to think that all these Olympic coaches, that even if they have a soft veneer, there's a lot of broken glass underneath it. But I haven't watched the Olympics, and I'll tell you one of the reasons why is because I don't know who's competing. I don't know, is this Big Pharma versus Big Pharma? I understand, and we've seen it in tennis. I think Tracy Austin was 13 or 14 when she kind of came on the scene way back when. If you're the best athlete in the world when you're 13, 14, or 15, then you should be able to compete against the best athletes in the world. But I'm just not interested in seeing a bunch of teenagers put under that much pressure to try and perform. It almost feels to me like it's some sort of freak show where we're torturing precocious kids. And then the ones who aren't, I'm more interested in the 40-year-old guys from the UP who are competing in, I don't know what, the dog sled or whatever the hell they're doing up there.
Which is not an Olympic event, actually. But it's interesting you mentioned that, because the average age of the downhill, the men's downhill skiing on the podium was 35. So clearly there's something to be said about the mileage in the years. Greg, there was a case.
I'm 55. I'm going downhill faster than I ever have. So I think I should be competing.
You know what? We will as long as you wear the Deadline Detroit corporate logo, we will sponsor you, right, Nancy? Or am I issuing a fatwa beyond my means?
A fatwa. Oh.
Before we move on from this topic, though, I want to, I watched, and I apologize, we're having some audio.
Oh, Nancy, you're on mute.
But I want to recommend you guys watch Athlete A, which is on Netflix. It's been out for a while. It's the documentary was done
My own mute.
Case. It's very, very good, and it gets into that whole thing that ML was just talking about with young teenagers, and they talk about how when if you look at gymnastics competitions from the 50s and 60s, it's grown women who are doing these moves. And of course, the moves are far less dramatic than they are now, handstands and that kind of thing. But sometime around the Nadia Comaneci era in the mid 70s, that's when you started to see the sport move swiftly and sharply in the direction of these little kids and, these young teenagers, and that kind of led to the abuse culture, because young teens are, easy to manipulate. They're easy to groom. They're much easier to control overall from some of these malevolent coaches. And you know, it wouldn't surprise.
Some of whom, by the way, Nancy, defected and moved to the United States, like Bella Caroli.
Yes, exactly right. And he was, and he's one of the worst. I mean, he brought that coaching culture with him, and so now what you have are these, these, like I said, athletic robots who are these, it's almost like watching a form of child abuse. I mean, even last night when this girl was, this, what's her face, Valieva was weeping, her coach is like scolding her, why did you give up? Why didn't you keep fighting? What's wrong? What's wrong with you? It's like, dude, the time for that kind of coaching has passed. All right. I mean, at least for tonight, it's passed. It's like, this was it. She failed. Yelling at her now is not going to make her a better skater. What she needs now is, a tissue and a hug, and it's going to be okay. But she didn't get that.
Well, this is what happens when you watch A League of Their Own right before you go on, and there's no crying in baseball. So Greg,
Skating is hard work.
So Greg, there was a situation with back in the Summer Olympics with Sha'Carri Richardson, who an American track athlete who lost her mother, decided to self-medicate with a bit of the herb, and tested positive, was completely suspended, missed out on the Olympics, and most likely a chance, almost a surefire chance at a gold medal. She came out and said, well, this is really about race. Valieva was allowed to compete, whereas Richardson was not, by ostensibly some of the same governing bodies and mechanisms to adjudicate the case. Was this about race, or is it a bit more complicated with age and with the Ruskies involved?
Are you asking the black guy? It's always about race, man.
Dude, I already asked the other two questions. I mean, if you want, I can ask myself the question.
Yeah, but you're South Asian,
So basically, you're saying we're not even good enough to compete in the Olympics. That's what you're saying.
Oh, wow. I know, right? No, it's it's an interesting sort of comparison. And here in the United States, it's hard to kind of escape having that kind of discussion. As it relates to the treatment. I mean, we just saw yesterday, right? The two kids get into a fight at the mall in New Jersey. The white cops show up. They throw the brother on the ground. He's like 14. They throw him on the ground, put their knee on him, handcuff him, and they tell the other kid who started the fight, it's okay, sit down, you can go now. So we're bombarded with these kind of situations that we all find appalling. So it becomes hard to not look at the way people are treated through the lens of race. You've got the situation where the lady was sentenced to 6 years for voter fraud, for voting ostensibly when she wasn't supposed to, because she had been convicted of a felony and this other kind of stuff, and it gets complicated. At the same time, we see all the people who stormed the Capitol and tried to overthrow our government, disrupt the entire process, getting slapped on the hand with a couple months in Camp Cupcake in the federal penitentiary system so far. Is it the same?
The people who were legally, politically discoursizing?
Right, exactly, right. Acceptable political discourse. Maybe on the hockey arena, right, ML? Right, maybe on the ice that's acceptable.
Even then, you don't smash somebody's helmet against their head. I mean, that's...
Wow, yeah, that's true, too. You don't hit them with a fire extinguisher either, right?
So Greg, I'm gonna have
but is it? I think the question is it fair to even have that conversation? I think it's fair to have the conversation and to be able to look at the circumstances. Weed is illegal.
Let me ask you this on a PR level then. Do you think that this young skater was the victim of Putin envy? Given what's happening in the geopolitical spheres with Russia and Ukraine, was she just sort of this totemic victim of American attitudes toward Russia?
as a proud member of Generation X who remembers what it was like to hide under your desk and lean up against a wall, waiting for the Russian bombs to drop. I think we should have finished the job that Reagan started a long time ago.
We should have finished the job Rocky IV started.
Right. Oh, Ronnie, get your gun. But is she a victim of the Putin thing? Why wouldn't she be? I mean, she's a kid. That's the other thing that's not being taken into consideration here. Just what Nancy was talking about. You know, we got these kids here, and the Olympics are supposed to provide some level of protection for them against, you know, the maleficent actions on the part of adults who want to use them at any cost to get the gold. So the truth is, will we ever really find out the truth about, you know, did she ingest this on her own, or was she forced to by the state, or was it a mistake because she was hugging her grandpa and, you know, she somehow ingested some kind of medication that he was taking? I don't know. I mean, it's happening in China, first of all. So not exactly an open society.
You know, back in the old days, it was better. I mean, when I just would hug my grandma, all I got was a bit of patchouli and some Bengay.
Russians,
I don't know what patchouli is, but
the Russians cheat. Okay, we know this about them. If I can recommend another Netflix documentary, there's one called Icarus that came out 3 or 4 years ago that was about the 2014 Russian doping scandal. And we know these people cheat. We know that they are ingenious about cheating. I'm very down on Russia these days, even though I've been a Russophile for most of my life.
Does Lengel know?
So the fact that one of their athletes comes up with a dirty sample should not make people say, oh, well, she must have hugged her grandpa, or she must have accidentally like drank from the same glass and ingested, you know, this microscopic trace of his heart medication. That's a laughable defense. You know, I don't think a 15-year-old probably has any kind of access to these kinds. I mean, this is a very sophisticated strategy to give somebody a drug that's for, you know, a heart medication, which actually increases blood flow, which increases, you know, your ability to make these insane jumps. I mean, I think she was doped. I don't think she did it on her own. I think she, you know, they're on a training table diet. They're on very strict dietary restrictions so they don't gain too much weight. I think that's exactly what happened to her. I don't blame her. I blame the country that she competes for. I mean, look at them. They're not even competing under the flag of Russia. They're the Russian Olympic Committee. I mean, give me a break. If they really were serious about wanting doping out of the Olympics, the Russians wouldn't be there at all.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, number one, it might have been the whole Russian system, but certainly, particularly NBC, just focused on her. And second of all, if she didn't need heart medication before, I think she sure as hell is going to need it now. I mean, they really, really bulldozed her. So let's see.
Poor girl, I feel bad for her.
But I think, I mean, we're all in the public stage. I mean, having the conversation about the way that the sister was treated over the Summer Olympics compared to how the Russian ice ballerina is treated, you know, viewed through the lens of the American public and the American media, I do think that there is some, you know, a different way of treating her, you know, from that perspective. I mean, you know, Nancy, we just gave her the benefit of the doubt. You know, she's 15. Well, there's no way she could have known. You can escape.
I'm on this long driving trip, and I was listening. So I've been kind of mainlining NPR for the last 36 hours. And I heard an interview with some reporter in Beijing who was talking about how the testing was mishandled, that the flag should have gone up immediately, but instead it was, you know, several weeks.
Right. Her
B sample hasn't been tested because that's what you do when you drop an A sample and a B sample at the same time. And then they test one, and if then they test the second one to make sure it wasn't a false positive, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a certain amount of hair splitting here, but I think that Sha'Carri Richardson is absolutely right. I mean, she was unfairly penalized for a non-performance enhancing drug. And this girl wasn't, except for the penalty that she inflicted upon herself, which was, of course, her case of the yips that caused her to, do the spinning butt fall. So,
well, not everyone is going to agree with your assessment that weed is not a performance-enhancing drug.
not for a runner, okay?
Well,
maybe for a beat poet, but not.
Well,
for
I thought that would be a good enough segue to the halftime show at the Super Bowl with Snoop Dogg. See how deftly that was done. Thank you very much. So the Super Bowl, lots to talk about with the Detroit angle as well. So I'd like to, ML, what was your assessment about the game, Matthew Stafford, and the halftime show?
Yeah, so I've kind of given up on professional sports for the same reason I've given up on the Olympics, because I don't know who's taking what. I don't know who's motivated by what. I don't think it's about the athletes or the games. It's about the sponsors and the owners and all this other stuff. And we have a woman who can't compete in the Olympics because she smoked some weed. And then we got somebody who I don't know how she got those drugs from her grandpa, but that's not how I hugged my grandparents. I look at the NFL and I see people beating the crap out of their kids, out of their girlfriends. They get thrown off one team. They get picked up by another team. I see a coach like Jim Caldwell, who's the best coach the Lions have had in 50 years. He gets fired. He can't get another job. We were talking about this on my podcast because Sean Windsor had written a great column about, how do you know there's racism in the NFL? Just look at the number of black coaches. And as we're talking about it, I realized there's one more black coach, there's one less black coach in hockey than there is in football. I mean, that's all I need to know. So I watched the second half. I thought it was an entertaining game. Matt Stafford, win, lose, he gets $25 million a year. So he kind of won before the game started. And I think he played, he wasn't a difference maker in Detroit, but he played with guts. So that's great. But, when there's a sporting event and all we care about is the commercials and the halftime show, I'm out.
Well, clearly you're not invested.
What a party pooper you are, man. You're not invited to my Super Bowl party. Not that I ever have them.
Let's put it this way, Nancy. If we had smoked some weed, that would have been a buzzkill. So go ahead, Nancy. What was your assessment?
I thought the game was, I abstained from an opinion on the game because it's basically the only football game a year that I watch. I think I watched 2 others this year, but I thought the halftime show was great. I really liked it. I think all of the yammering about, hip hop's time has come or whatever is ridiculous, because basically that was all oldies music that we heard during that show. I mean, Eminem, Dre, I just heard today is Dre's birthday. He's 57 years old. Mary J. Blige, all those folks, they're all like, they're not Medicare. They're not getting Medicare yet, but, they're starting to think about it. And so, but the show was great. It was very high energy. It was fun. It was fun to watch. I liked the way they set up the set. It looked like houses in Compton. I thought the transitions between the various artists were very smooth. I mean, medleys are always tricky because you always end up sounding like somebody on the Merv Griffin show. But it was, it was.
And that would be wrong. Why?
I was entertained. I thought,
So, Greg, I'm going to ask you. I mean,
still really good.
And it is, and I mean, you're gonna have to forgive me because this is about race. There was this tribute to all of these great artists. There was the little piano tribute by Dre to Tupac with California Dreaming. You had Eminem taking a knee, even though the NFL admonished him not to. My question is, if you're gonna go ahead and give tribute to all of these old school rappers, where's Vanilla Ice?
Oh man, Vanilla Ice and Eminem should never be said in the same paragraph on the same show. I mean, I guess 2 things. 1, Generation X was representing, baby. Somebody's grandpa was on that stage. I was loving it, I mean, from that perspective, I thought that was really cool to see the sort of 90s put on display in that kind of way. And the other thing is that Detroit was represented. Detroit was represented in the game with Stafford coming from the Lions. And of course, when he threw that interception in the second quarter, I was like, once a Lion, always a Lion. I was like, I'm going to watch this and see how they could lose, but I was happy that he pulled that, he was able to pull it off, which brings up the other thing about that. If you're going to call the LA Rams, the Detroit Rams, right? They're bound to start playing like the Lions. Come on.
all of that merch around town.
I know, right? But Stafford, I mean, having come from Detroit and suffered through all that stuff, it was good to see that kind of thing happen. In some kind of way, I have so many friends, they felt vindicated, like somehow, we kind of won, you know what I mean? Too, with that victory. At the same time, the halftime show, what's cool about the halftime show is, first of all, having Eminem there. I don't know about his whole Mom Spaghetti store and all that stuff. I haven't been there yet. ML, have you been there? You're the white dude on the stage here. You been to any Mom Spaghetti yet?
Yeah, no, my mom's got her own spaghetti.
No, but and so, I appreciated the way that even he represented, man, and taking that knee. It had to be a white dude taking a knee. You couldn't have Snoop or Dre or somebody like that taking the knee, because that would have been too offensive. But to have Eminem do it, after Eminem had already said, to anybody who's my fan of mine that likes Trump and doesn't like me because of Trump, well, F you, you don't need to be my fan. Total Detroit attitude, irreverence when it comes to that kind of thing. So it was good to see that. It was good to see Detroit represented in those two ways. And I think that, some people thought that there was going to be this big backlash because you had all these brothers and sisters up there. I mean, it was everybody. It was a rainbow, but, it was black centered, singing rap and shaking the booties and all that stuff. I was looking for a wardrobe malfunction of an epic scale. I was like, it's rap. It's got to happen. Come on. But
on who? Dre or Snoop?
Nah, you had all those women out there dancing. You had their butts barely covered, barely, right? I thought for sure that there was going to be something untoward, completely irreverent, signifying hip hop and Generation X. Like, we don't care about y'all rules, just thinking rules. But that didn't happen. So it was like a clean. There wasn't even a poll. What do you call those polls?
A POLE poll?
Yeah.
Like a stripper
pole?
Yeah, there wasn't even a stripper pole that said they had all those rooms and all these women scantily dressed and all this stuff. They even have brothers in prison outfits dancing. I was like,
Yeah, but that's been going back since Jailhouse
Where's the stripper
Rock.
pole? Where is the stripper pole? This ain't real. This is your grandpa's hip hop,
So I liked the other Detroit buy-in, which was wading through all the ads for crypto and for electric vehicles. The Chevy ad with the Sopranos kids.
You like that? I thought that was.
I'm a big Sopranos fan, and that was just really poignant. I thought it was really cool.
You know what? I don't like the Sopranos because those was a bunch of racist. I just couldn't stand it. It was terrible. All the racism on there, I couldn't. I hated that show. But anyway, I get it. I get why people, like it. But anyway, yeah, no stripper poles. That was missing, and from the hip hop show. And I thought that there would be more of a backlash to it. I've seen some memes where it was like all white people with like angry faces saying they hated the show. But I think it had a universal appeal in lots of ways. I mean, you can't say the 90s without thinking about hip hop, and certainly Eminem has his place on there.
Yeah,
he's one of the greatest rappers ever. And he's a white dude that fits into the culture by just being himself. You know what I'm saying? He's not. I appreciate that. It's not. I always tell people, white people from Detroit are different from the rest of y'all. You know, they don't. You know, these are white folks that will get in your face and tell you don't say the N-word. They'll be just as offended. You know, and it is a different kind of empowerment that I see from even like ML. You know, I mean, he gets down. What other journalists? I've never seen another white journalist join the National Association of Black Journalists. ML did. And he was right in there. I'm just saying, there's a reflection and attitude that comes out here that I don't see reflected in other places. And I think Eminem reflected that in that show. This really super black hip hop show, you know, had this white boy on there who fit right in. He wasn't trying to be anything else but himself in Detroit. It was cool.
Nancy.
It was cool.
Can we get back to talking about The Sopranos?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I saw the ad. I saw the ad again last night.
Hey, Saeed, man, why you keep blanking Nancy out? We can't hear.
Would you shut up for once? Lay off the edibles before this show, okay? I mean, you've been talking about Eminem for 5 minutes now. I thought the Sopranos ad was really good, and the one thing I noticed last night was when Meadow puts her arm around
Can you guys hear
her brother. She's wearing a great big old wedding ring. So it's like, you know, it's like, let's reboot The Sopranos with Meadow and her hapless little brother. Meadow can be the mob boss now, and I think they can do some good work with that. So anyway,
well, Tony Jr.'s grown up.
He is.
Absolutely. It would be nice to have a revival. I mean, even Beavis and Butthead are coming out with a new movie. Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe. So that's coming up. So a couple of things going on here in the legal front. We have Eric Smith, ex-Macomb County prosecutor. His sentencing, and we have Michigan State Representative Jewel Jones copping to a guilty plea on a DWI and a weapons charge. Who'd like to tackle either one?
So I'll talk about Smith. Greg, you talk about Jewel Jones. That's what I just have to tell you a Detroit stripper pole story. I was knocking on doors late one night, and a woman opens the door, and I look over her shoulder, and there's a brass pole right in the middle of her living room, and nothing else. And I said, "Hey, I'm Elrick. I'm running for Detroit City Council, but first I got to ask you about that pole."
What did she say? She was teaching classes?
She said she does a workout. I said,
"Oh, okay."
In the living room, but anyway, she had a big
maybe she was a firefighter.
But suffice to say, she wasn't going to donate to the campaign because I think she's used to getting donations in small denominations. You know, let's do it. I'll do Jewel Jones. You know, what a disaster. You know, this guy's in one problem after another. Finally, cops to it. You know, I mean, what is there to say? I mean, where does he go from here? Does he get reelected? I guess it depends who runs against him. But, you know, it's just a shame when we have young folks coming forward who seem to have a bright future that they go off the rails. And I don't know who's advising people. And I know from covering the Kilpatrick administration, sometimes it's not that people aren't giving you advice, it's that you're not taking it. But this case seemed to go as crazy as possible. It seemed to drag on way longer than it absolutely needed to. And in the end, what do we have? I mean, it's just he fits in pretty well with the kind of lawmakers we've been sending to Lansing for 40, 50 years.
Oh, that's harsh. I mean, you know, ML, one of the things that
Dennis Dutko, these are white guys from Detroit, from Warren, who had addiction problems. John Kelly got pulled over speeding and tried to claim that he thought it was an undercover. He didn't know it was an unmarked state. It was an unmarked state police car. It didn't have a light, and he thought, well, maybe somebody was following him. I mean, you know, there's a legacy of Michigan lawmakers just do whatever the hell they please and hoping nobody finds out about it.
Well, you got that state senator that was feeling on that nurse's booty. We just copped it. You know, I was like, really? Really? He was a doctor, that guy, a senator. I kept looking for his name now.
You know, the people we send don't tend to be the best and brightest.
Yeah, it's when it came to the young man from Inkster, Jewel Ware, one of the things that I was struck by was how quickly he sort of like rose, out of that community. I mean, he was not a pastor, not a pastor, but what did you get on the board? I forget which. It's a board member or whatever on the church, a deacon. One of the youngest deacons, and then was in the Army ROTC program. This guy was an officer candidate to join the U.S. Army. When he got elected, they wrote stories. I don't know if it was the Army Times or one of them military publications about this young cadet getting elected to the state house. So what you have is almost this sort of like magical Negro kind of thing popping up here. A young guy on the rise, deacon, Army cadet officer, blah, that's a lot of pressure. I don't know where, the switch got flipped in his mind. I think it can be really hard. I mean, if you have seasoned people like ML or you, Saeed, or you, Nancy, raising your hand to go to Lansing, I have no doubt that you will conduct yourselves in a more appropriate kind of fashion and won't succumb to a lot of the pressures that exist up there. You got lobbyists up there who are taking you out and giving you this, and you're thinking about your future. So I don't know. I mean, young people make mistakes. People make mistakes. And I think Joel complicated his. Something's going on. Something's going on with that guy. I mean, who tapes a key to the bottom of their foot going into the jail? What do you think this is? Like James Bond? You're gonna take the key and magically, get out and go on the lam and live this exciting life. And wait, speaking of James Bond, somebody mentioned Icarus.
Yeah, Nancy did. Nancy, why don't you come on in?
I know.
Why don't you unmute?
I was just gonna say, if I go to Lansing, I plan to wild out. So, it's just it's like, what's the point in going there if you're not going to act crazy? No, this is term limits. Honestly, this is term limits, and this is you elect 26-year-olds to the legislature. What could possibly go wrong? Well, this is one of the things that can go wrong.
Baby Brown was an old dude. Dennis Dutka was an old dude. David J was an old dude.
Oh, that's name I hadn't heard about in a long time. Yeah, I remember that guy.
It's still the term. Well, no, that was pre-term limits. So I'm a little out of my depth when we talk about Lansing because I'm not a lifer like you guys are. But no, you're right about that. But
interesting term that you're using there, Nancy.
I know, right? I think it's time to do away with term limits, to be honest with you, for that very reason. I mean, I voted for term limits to get rid of John Engler. I was like, there's no way this guy's ever going to get out of here unless we have term limits.
It's in the Constitution and it's not going out. So that's the problem. So,
well, we've actually come full circle on this show. I mean, we were talking about age limits for Olympic athletes, age limits for elected officials. So, there's it all is one nice big circle. So we are now at that time of the show where we will be going to.
And now it's time for Deadline Detroit's nominees for Schmuck of the Week.
Oh
boy, there are so many this week. Nancy, let's start with you.
Okay, well, this is good because it's a good transition from the last topic. My Schmuck of the Week is Stephanie Zonderman Chatfield, who, with a husband who has admitted to multiple extramarital affairs, decided this week to go hard after her sister-in-law and blew the Christian dog whistles by claiming that she communes with spirits or hears voices, and by the way, she's making a documentary and blah blah blah. And I figure, if you're gonna go after a woman who claims she was sexually assaulted in your home when she was a teenager, I think there's a different way to do it, and she kind of proved her schmuckitude. But she married Lee Chatfield, so how nice of a person could she be? So that's me.
There you go. All right, Greg.
Oh man, that John Beeson guy, the guy who caught the feel on the lady that was trying to help him, when he had coronavirus. I'm like, who does that? You go see somebody, they're trying to help you, you're facing a deadly virus that can kill you, and you argue with the lady, and somewhere in your argument, you pull her close and cop a feel. What? And then he says, well, I was high, I was sick, I was on these drug thing, and so, is that what happens? Is that what happens? I think, he should be admonished by the state legislature. They need to strip him of his committees, and they need to, throw that guy out. I really do. I mean, I think his behavior it's appalling, and his excuse for it is appalling. And it's just, ML, you guys just brought it up. The behavior by some of these folks in the state legislature is not exactly what we would like to see. But, I just think that's ridiculous. And, thank God Lee Chatfield is not there anymore. Can you imagine what it would have been like? And they have admonished people for far less than allegedly, what Chatfield has done. I mean, can they strip him? Can they do anything post his service? Anybody know?
Yeah,
I don't know if it even qualifies for getting rid of his pension. So, but he may have hugged his grandfather and got some of that heart medicine in him, and that could be his defense. So,
yeah, that could.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what kind of sick. It's just, I don't know. This is crazy.
ML, who's your schmuck of the week?
When it comes to Lansing lawmakers, being masked and staying 6 feet away should never go away. So I'm going to make my schmuck brief, but I do want to go back to Jewel Jones and Eric Smith, because we didn't talk about Eric Smith. Disgraceful what he did, the betrayal of the public trust, the sense of entitlement. It's disgusting. 21 months in prison. Come on. I guess he cooperated, so they went a little easy on him. But yeah, no sympathy for Eric Smith. I do have sympathy for Jewel Jones, because we can't expect people to be perfect. And as Greg said, there's a lot of pressure on young guys, particularly young guys of color, to be amazing when they get in a leadership position. My fault with Jewel Jones is how he handled it. Everybody makes a mistake, and the younger you are, the more likely you are to make a mistake. But it's not whether you never fall. It's how you pick yourself up. And that's where I think where he did not cover himself in glory. Which brings us to another disgraced politician who's my schmuck of the week. Mayor of Hudson, Ohio. Great leader, Craig Schubert. They were talking about, should they have ice shanties on a lake, a frozen lake in the city, because they thought, it might be a nice recreational thing for people there in the good city of Hudson, Ohio. And he said, well, you put those shanties up, you're inviting prostitution. And appropriately, this guy got laughed right off the stage, and actually got laughed right out of his job. But if you can't tell the difference between a fishnet and fishnet, panty and panty, if you don't know the difference between an ice shack and a love shack.
I got to tell you something, though, ML. In Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin and northern Minnesota, they do have prostitutes who go from shanty to shanty, and it is a thing. I promise you.
Well, they got that at truck stops. Nobody's trying to close down the rest areas.
They know the wives and girlfriends aren't going to be there because they're not insane, and they don't want to sit over in a shanty over a hole in the ice when it's 5 below zero. And they just know there's going to be a lot of guys there. So there is a thing, but I agree with you. That was not the time to bring it up.
Well, a bass brothel, a catfish cat house, a halibut whorehouse. Let's move on from that. So actually, ML,
this is great. Comedy is amazing.
ML, that was actually one of my choices as schmuck of the week. It could have been Kanye. It could have been Prince Andrew. It could have been Melania Trump, who had to bid on her own NFT in auction. But my schmuck of the week is Robin Folsom, the former Georgia Director of External Affairs for the state's Vocational Rehab Agency. Robin decided to fake a pregnancy, including using a prosthetic baby bump to score herself some paid maternity leave. It was discovered by a coworker when the fake stomach, quote, came away. She even, oh no, it gets better. She even fabricated a baby daddy by the name of Bran Otmembwe, which reminded me of Jan Brady, who was so desperate that she fabricated a boyfriend by the name of George Glass. So here you really do have life imitating art. And going back to the Gen X bastion of great TV, Greg, with Brady Bunch, that's why Robin Folsom is my schmuck of the week.
Actually, the Bradys are boomers.
Okay, but I was a Gen Xer watching them, so
that show was a boomer show.
Okay, boomer. Point taken. All right. Well, listen, and I want to apologize for some of the audio issues that we had today, but part of that was because of the courage and the commitment of Nancy joining us from the road. I figured out what that static is. Given the fact that she mentioned she's a Russophile, quite obviously Nancy is in Chernobyl, and that is a Geiger counter.
I'm very sorry.
It all makes
very
sense
sorry.
now. It all makes sense
but,
now, Tovarisha. Okay. Well, Nancy.
If we don't stop the Russians in Ukraine, they're going to be rolling across into Alaska any day now, because Sarah Palin can see it. She can see Russia from her house.
Well, we do need a Red Dawn 3. So,
She doesn't know it's Russia.
Yeah. So, Nancy, thank you, and spasiba. Greg, thanks for joining us. Dos Vidania. Thank you for joining us. And ML, thank you for joining us. And in lieu of our intrepid maestro, Alan Lengel, it is upon me to outro with his famous line, drive safely. Take care, everybody.